Hello everyone. I'm excited to be part of the Learning Revolution's The Emergency Home Learning and More Summit, and am pleased to be part of this. You all are all here to hear me speak about understanding your right brain child, understanding and honoring the natural learning path for right brain dominant children, and that's what I will be speaking on. I'd like to introduce you to myself and my family. My name is Cindy Gaddis. I have been married to my high school sweetheart, Weston, for 35 years. We are currently living in the beautiful state of North Carolina on 33 acres combined. And we have raised 7 children, 6 boys and 1 girl, 5 by birth, 2 by adoption. And we chose to homeschool them right from the beginning. Though my husband and I were very successful in school, we saw that our children were very creative and seemed to learn in a very different way than we remember school being. So I decided to try my hand at learning along with them. My oldest son was a great teacher. He was a very strong right brain dominant learner, and he was also very good at helping me understand how he learns and why he learns. And from that moment on, I just became his student and continued to learn more about this later on. When they were teenagers, I just wanted to know what it was that this was called, and that's where I came up with landing on the right brain, left brain paradigm. Though I do know that researchers have debunked this idea of left brain, right brain, they're really debunking the idea that if anyone hears that we are not using just half of our brain. We are using all of our brain. It's very intricately interwoven. But there are a set of traits that we call right brain dominant traits and left brain dominant traits that are identifiable. And until I come up with a more inclusive label, that's what I chose to use. So why do we need to know about this whole right brain, left brain dominant idea? Well, when we choose to become educators, we often repeat what we know. Most of us were public schooled. I was public schooled, so was my husband. So that's what we thought learning looked like, was what we experienced in school. However, I have come to realize that most mainstream public education systems favor the left brain dominant traits. And so therefore, if you have a right brain dominant learner, you may hit a wall. And when you hit this wall, it may be that they become very frustrated. They may melt down. They may call themselves stupid. They may become very resistant, and you're left wondering what is going on. When right brain children are in school and they hit this wall, what does schools do to explain this discrepancy of usually very intelligent children? They can see they're intelligent, but they're struggling in school. And why is that? Schools tend to be no-fault zones. So they are going to look for the solution of something's going on with this child. So we're going to test them and see if there's something wrong with them that explains why they're not being successful in the school environment. That's where you will hear a lot of learning disability labels. It can be dyslexia, it can be ADD are the most common ones, dyscalculia as well as dysgraphia, and other various learning disabilities come into play. So what I found interesting as I was doing these studies is behind every one of these labels is a right brain learner. Now, where are the left brain learning disability labels? Why is it only right brain children are diagnosed with a learning disability? To me, that raises a red flag. something's going on here, because if there really were such things as learning disabilities, then there should be learning disabilities across the board. But what we're really doing here, because I am not saying there's no such thing as dyslexia or ADD, there absolutely is. But what I am saying is the traits that make up those learning disabilities are a normal, natural expression of creative right brain children. And if put in the right learning environment, that would, those differences in how they process information would not be a problem. And in fact, a lot of times when people have had their children diagnosed with learning disabilities and they've pulled them from school and started to homeschool them and adjusted the education environment to meet their particular needs, they will find that ADD all but disappears, or dyslexia, or other such things. Yes, those traits are there, but they're flourishing in the right environment. So what are the traits of a right brain dominant person and a left brain dominant person? So the universal traits, I wanted to come up with a couple traits that universally everyone who's left brain dominant will have these two. And everyone who's right brain dominant will have these two, because here's the thing. Whenever I give these conference presentations, I use two of my children who, betwixt the two of them, cover all the traits, but they often don't cross. So remember, brain dominance and brain functioning is a continuum, because again, we're using all of our brain. And we have so many complexities that make ourselves up. We have different genders. We have different verbal abilities. We have different gifted levels. So all of those contribute to how we are as a whole person. But those who are right brain dominant, the easiest way to determine if they are right brain dominant or not is to find out if they think in pictures. Now, when you're talking about a 3-year-old, that's going to be hard to discover. So we'll talk later about how we discover other things. But those of us who process in the way that we prefer to process often don't realize that other people don't process the same way. I can't see pictures in my mind. If I'm trying to recall somebody's name, for instance, I will think of a letter. It starts with a certain letter. As a left brain dominant person, I'm very much thinking words. So I will think of the letter of their name that comes to my mind. Whereas a person who thinks of their dog will see a picture of their dog. A person who is right brain dominant, when they're reading a book, can see movies moving in their minds as they're reading this book. I can't do that. I feel characters. I don't see images. I'm highly left-brained. I have several highly right-brain dominant children, and I have some that are in between. Again, remember, there's a continuum here. So you're going to see yourself in both sides a lot of times, but you will be dominant more in one side. And just as a caveat, the gender female is left brain and the gender male is right brain. So therefore, if you are a female right brain person, the female gender side of you can still, females tend to be more wordy, right? We talk more. We tend to be more organized. It's what we're known for as being female. Not always. You may still not have a lot of those female traits, but you can still be right brain dominant and have some of those left brain traits brought in because you're female. And same with the other side. Sorry, that just flipped. And it doesn't seem to be going back. Well, that's not useful. But we're going to go on anyway. So anyway, keep that in mind. So I wanted to do a little test here to explain, if we recall, left brain people are more organized, right brain people are more creative and imaginative, left brain people are word-based, and right brain people are image-based. So I want to expose our value system, okay? So when you see this image here, on the screen. Which do you value more? In the sense of, if Grandma and Grandpa were coming over, or your neighbor, and you wanted to show off your child's intelligence, would you show them the left side of the screen, which is all the writing about Nick and Nora, or would you show them the right side of the screen with all the pictures? Most likely, if we are being honest, we would like to show them the left side and show them, look at all the writing my child has been doing, right? It's a value system that's ingrained deep down inside of us that we don't even know is there until this kind of thing comes out, when we want to show off what our child knows. Even if we value ourselves the right side, we would show the left. So here's the story behind this. The left one is my daughter, around 6-7 years old. She actually took a book called Nick and Nora. It's actually a picture book that's been written by somebody else, and she copied word for word just the words out of this picture book onto this page. Okay. On the right side, my son, about the same age, 6-7, when he, after watching the Lion King movie when it first came out, he decided to recreate the story after watching it. So none of these are made up stories. These were just all copied. So my daughter copied a book and my son copied a movie. But one used words to copy and one used images to copy. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating? All right, so if you had these two samples and you wanted to show off what your child is learning in his education, whether at school or at homeschool, which one would you want to show off? Would you show off the left side where you have mirror image writing, or would we be running to the nearest dyslexia specialist, right? Or would we be showing off the right-hand side? This division is so hard, right? So let's talk about what we're seeing here. So this is actually from the same child. This is my builder child. He was my Lego guy. And one day he had discovered that you can write in mirror imagery and of course hold it up to a mirror, and voila, isn't that cool? And he just thought that was very cool. He has such a high level of spatial awareness, but in particular, when you remember what the universal trait for being right brain was thinking in pictures, right? And then I put in parentheses 3D. Now, three-dimensionality means you can see things from all the different angles. Now think about that. Why can't we see B going this way, that way, up, or down? We can draw a cat going that way. We can draw a cat going that way. We can show from the top down on a cat. We could even show the underneath of a cat if we wanted to draw that, right? So three-dimensionality is, I can understand that something has all various sides to it. Why can't the letters have all various sides to it too? So actually my son discovered he could write in mirror image very easily, and he had a super fun time for about a month writing all sorts of things and giving it to me and asking me to look in the mirror at, right? So fun. We all know that a famous, I think it's Van Gogh, that was found out all of his journals were written in mirror image because he didn't understand that he was even doing that. It was just so three-dimensional, just came naturally to him. On the right-hand side, the same builder son, right brain people have such a difficult time with long division. Why? Because it's sequential. That's a left brain task. It is symbolic. So there's a lot of steps and everything, so they get lost in the middle of that. So my son created his own way to do division that made sense to him at first. Sure, I tried to teach him the shortcut method, right? But if this is how he could understand it, so be it. He stacked it on top and would do zeros and did almost like place value version of doing long division. It worked. He did this for a couple years, and a couple years in, as his brain continued to integrate, because it does over time, He could do it the shortcut way that we all know about. But what was wrong with doing it this way? So it's all about our value system. What do we value? What have we been taught to be worried about, such as the mirror image, right? So, all right. How about these two? So we've got on the left, he is reading a computer programming book with a cat in the lap. And on the right, we've got him building a Lego structure. Same child, different ages. So what are we going to brag about when Grandma and Grandpa come over and what they're learning? Are we going to be bragging about the fact that he's, reading a computer programming book? Probably faster than we're going to brag about the Lego structure, right? Once again, let's talk about this. So interestingly, I feel strongly that all of his Lego building led him to computer programming. The other interesting point here is this is a child that didn't learn to read till he was 11. For right-brained children, it is normal to start to learn to read between 8 and 10. And we will talk about that later, why. Remember, visual imagery first, then they start integrating the other things. So here he is at, I think he's 14 here. So only 3 years after learning to read, he's reading a computer programming book. And Legos, I mean, that's the imagination, that's creativity. It really does build a foundation towards the other more valued skill set that will come later. All right, so let's talk about the other traits that make someone left hemisphere dominant or right hemisphere dominant. So we've got on the opposite of the highly developed imagination, we have reality-based. I am a serious reality-based person. When I took a test, I was 60% reality-based. I am a serious realist. Even when I was a child, I played in a reality-based way, whether it's I'm being a teacher, because I see that in reality, or even things like I would take all my stuffed animals and put it into a pile and then sort them, take turns sorting them out, and that's all I would do. I didn't even take it any further than doing that. It was very reality-based. On the opposite side of sequential, for the left brain person, we have global. They are global learners. They like to learn holistically. Again, look for under there. They're whole to part learners versus part to whole. So that's why left hemisphere people can do the reading, writing, and spelling really well, because they can be part to whole. Give me the parts. Tell me C-A-T spells cat. That's the part going to the whole. I understand that. But a right brain person wants to see the cat first and then see the parts. So they tend to like sight words first, especially nouns and things that have a picture. So cat has a picture, and then they can understand it. But the doesn't have a picture. All those Dolch words that they're supposed to learn early, they can struggle with that because they have no visual picture to them. But teach them encyclopedia, they're going to remember that quicker than the. Interesting, isn't it? Think about husbands who are putting together a new shelf that you bought from IKEA. Are they looking at the instructions first? Because that's what a left brain person would do. Or are they looking at the image on the box and then trying to make it from that image, that holistic picture? It can really frustrate some spouses. All right, memorization versus association. This is another biggie. Schools use heavy memorization to help kids learn. But right brain people learn better by association. So memorization tools are a short-term memory thing, and associative learning is a long-term memory thing. So let me associate this set of information with this set of information, so now it makes sense. They like concept, they like to understand how it all fits together versus just memorizing. Logical with left brain people versus intuitive. My daughter was such an intuitive thinker, and then she married a logical person. It was difficult at first. Compliant and resistant are only up there because school exists. They're going to resist because The environment isn't set up. If they had the right environment, this wouldn't even exist. External versus internal perfectionism. Product versus process. I have so many people say, but my right brain person doesn't finish anything because they love the process. The process means everything to them. But you know what? We need each other. We need left brain and right brain people. So the process people think of all the great ideas, and the product people, the left brainers, finish it for them. We all work together, right? We need each other. And they do finish things, but there's also teamwork, right? There's strengths for every person. And then time, left brain people are very aware of time. And then those right brain people, right? 5 minutes, and then they're lost in Lululand. Because remember, to be creative, you have to be in the flow. Flow is a sense of timelessness. They operate the best in timelessness. So time is their enemy, right? And space, they can see that. I remember having a child at 1.5 going around driving in the car, and his little head could barely even look out the window, and he knew right where I was and was telling me where to go. Amazing. All right, so now we've got these traits, and how does this fit into the whole school thing? Well, as I started doing all this brain research, and I started understanding that there were stages of development and stages of brain development, right? We all know brains are developing even into the 20s. But what I've discovered is the 5 to 7 year stage, they are in, they're young. They're just going to sit and enjoy their strength area. If they're right brain dominant, they want to do right brain dominant things. If they're left brain dominant, they want to do left brain dominant things. They're sitting in their strength. They're young. They're not ready to delve beyond what they just come naturally to them. And then 8 to 10, the brain starts to transition. It starts to bring in some of the opposite side of the skill set. Yes, left brain stuff isn't as easy for me, but my brain is developing and learning how it works well together, and so I can start bringing in left brain things and vice versa. And then 11 to 13, yes, 11 to 13 years old, then we're integrating fully. By the end of that this is middle school, right? By the end of middle school, everything's working very well together. No wonder middle school is such a mess, right? There's so many reasons why middle school is. But what I want us to do then is take a look at this chart, because if you look at the topics, I can even do this. So here we've got our normal reading, writing, arithmetic that we see in school at the young ages, right? But look at our right brain people. You're not quite ready for this until the 8 to 10, and then spelling. Let's see, it's way over here. Spelling and writing, there's a reason why it's later. But listen, it's still here. It's just at a different time. It's just at a different time, okay? Because then left brain people, they need social studies, geography, history, and science. Not that they're not getting it younger, but they're just getting more peace. They're really focusing on this, right? We know that's true. And so what happens to these poor right brainers? These are the things they would be good at. And they're good at a lot of things. And you notice that everything's being covered. Everything's being covered at a different time. But we value the left brain scope and sequence. Schools follow the left brain scope and sequence. So what is that fair to right brain learners? If you're a homeschooler, how exciting that you can value other subjects at different stages. They're going to get covered. They're just going to be covered in a different way. So you're going to have to put your blinders on and not worry about what school's doing and how Susie's doing so well reading. He'll get to reading, or she'll get to reading when it's time for them. So let's talk about what are they doing. What are they doing at 5 to 7? I already know my time was going to go fast. All right. So let's go ahead and go on. So creative outlets. They need creative outlets. This is another way that you can figure out if your child is right-brained. Do they think in pictures? Or do they pursue one or more of these creative outlets? They live and breathe by. This is what gives them joy. If you don't, and do we find these in school, or are these considered extracurricular at the best, right? Are these the first things being pulled out of school when they're trying to save money? Yes. And yet this is the core of who they are. They need to be creative. So we need to value that. So I'm going to teach a few things. I might have to go through this more quickly so I can get through, since I'm supposed to end in about 5 minutes. All right, so art and drawing. Let me give you a cool example with my son about how writing was brought to pass with an artist, okay? An artist who's visual. So remember that 5 to 7, they're in their core, right? And what is his core? Images, right? So 5 to 7, he was always, listen, what is writing? Writing is expressing your ideas. Writing words to paper is one way, right? Is one way to express your ideas. There's many ways to express your ideas. Oral storytelling is expressing your ideas. Having discussions around the kitchen table is expressing your ideas. Creating a video with your friends with movies is expressing your ideas. And so is creating a story from pictures, right? This is the same thing. He recreated a story just with pictures. Okay, 5 to 7, he's in his imagery. Then what did I say happens at 8 to 10? I said they start to transition. They start to bring in some of the left brain side. And look at this. Isn't this fascinating? Comics. Image-based with some writing added, right? He started this comic around 8 years old. And he went till about 11 years old, about 500 pages. Now, there's a profession you can go into that's all process. A comic strip creator. There is no ending, right? You just keep creating. You don't have to have a finished product in the sense of this comic kept going on and on and on until he just decided to stop. So there he has both the transition, and then what happens at 11 to 13? Fully integrated. Voila, he dropped the pictures. I didn't make him do any of this. This is what naturally happened. After I started researching the brain research, I find this, I'm like, wow, mind blown, right? So here he is. He hand wrote a 100-page script because his friends were coming over. We'd moved away. They had been making videos and movies, and they were going to come visit for 2 weeks, and he didn't want to waste time with the script. He wanted it ready to go, so he hand wrote a 100-page script. Someone who did not write very much at all, right? But he was always expressing his ideas. Isn't that fascinating? This is how writing comes about. He was telling oral stories. He was doing videos. He was always following me around, telling me all his stories. He was expressing his ideas just because it wasn't on paper with just writing. And then when it came time, he had great writing. I never taught him a class. Then we got math and numbers. Here's my math guy. So he was a trained person. So what does he do? Here's the visual imagery with counting by tens with train cars. Kind of makes sense, right? They hook together just like train cars do. And so he was a spatial, my math kid was a spatial. He does the whole piano thing. So when he was 5 to 7, he was doing the pentominoes, geoboards, tangrams, right? Pictorial math, right? This is the 8 to 10. He was taking one of the standardized tests that you have to do in North Carolina. I taught him the concept of multiplication, but I had not taught him how to do multiplication. But he knew how to add. Isn't this cool? I don't know if I can move I can't move my picture. But look at this pattern. So 1 and 1, 23 plus 23 makes a 2. 46 is 2 23s. Then put the 2's together. 92 is 4. And you kept going until this was 16, and he added a 2 more to make the 18. Fascinating. Patterns, right? Patterns. That's really a math person. And then he ended up computer programming. Video games. My artist son used it as fodder for his creative storytelling. My math kid used it to say, how does this tick? I want to know. I want to know how to create it. Here's your theater showmanship. Showmanship is things like magician and comedian. Those are showmanships. Fashion sewing, they love to take what's in their head and create it. Gardening and cooking, my husband is a English gardener. That's like art, right? Building with Legos, obvious here. He is at grandma's house and she just had a bucket and he just built these off the bucket. And then he also used them to understand, so by association, he used his strengths to understand other subjects, like when we were doing pyramids, and he created a pyramid. Inside this pyramid is a bunch of mazes. He learned to do music spatially. I learned verbally. So in this case, I would say this is an A. Let's see, right? This is an A and this is an E. And then I have to remember that. But he saw that this went somewhere on space on the keyboard down here. And this went somewhere on space in the key. And he knew where in space they were. And he also could see how far apart they were to put his fingers. So he didn't even know any of these note names. He just knew where they fell in space. And so he played spatially. It was far superior to me as a player. Then we have puzzles and mazes. You think, okay, that's for, preschool. But here he is creating mazes. And this is 5 to 7. So he's putting pictures in, right? There's his train, there's the house, mom and dad, or his sister, I think. And then in the 8 to 10, voila, no pictures, right? Also, he's integrated. He doesn't need pictures anymore. Very interesting. All right, so we're back. That is covering the creative outlets. So let's quick look at history, science, and geography at the 5-7. So science, he was into dinosaurs, animals. They love that kind of thing. So we just did some puzzles there. Ancient histories, because remember there's a story to it, right? There's a story to history. I hated history in school because I'm very left brain. It made no sense to me. But they love these stories. And so he's drawing out what he's learning without me asking him. When it comes to social studies, the community stuff, you're living that, but also cultures, right? They love different cultures and different things. He was doing a card game. Now, this is more like 11, 12, 13. He was doing a card game and he wanted to research and make sure that when he was doing his drawing that it was accurate. And then animals and geography. Here's a great example of learning by association. He learned all of his continents because he liked animals. He wanted to know where they lived. So by association, he learned his continents because he liked animals. All right, so here we are back. And then reading and arithmetic comes at 8 to 10 because now they're ready to start converting their images and knowing how to do the two-dimensional symbolic, because cat, C-A-T, is an actual cat, right? And same with the numbers. 2 actually represents something, right? 2 is like 2 giraffes and another 2 squirrels. But 2 plus 2, 2 giraffes plus 2 squirrels does not equal 4 zoo animals. It would equal 4 animals, but not 4 zoo animals. So 2 plus 2 does not always equal 4 if you understand that everything has to have, it's associated with something. So now they're ready to understand that symbolism of reading and academics, but they're going to convert everything, all the math, all the reading, to images. So starting with sight words, and I'm not talking about Dolch sight words, I'm talking about nouns, verbs, adjectives. They will pick those up quicker than those little on, the, is, because they don't have visuals. They might skip those actually at first because they only need to pick up about a third of the words to create a visual. All they have to do, and they are skim readers, they're going to skim enough to get a visual, and now they're understanding, and it's going to work its way out over time. And then so you can put the phonics behind, but you start with the sight words and put the phonics behind. I believe in both. Left brain people want to start with phonics and put the sight words behind. Right brain wants to start with sight words and put the phonics behind it. You can still get both of them done. I really have run out of time. I'm even over. So I'm sorry I don't get to do this. I will keep these visuals. I don't know if we can keep these visuals in it. It might make sense to you to look over them. This is my write-up about math. I saw that there's two different math people. Manipulative based are your natural math people, and then visual verbal based math programs for your like your artists and your verbal oriented people, and then some reading tidbits. And back to that, and then I have some samples of spelling examples, but I just don't have time to go through that. So I appreciate again coming to the Learning Revolution. I'm pretty sure that he's putting down my contact information if you want to contact me about more of this information, or where my website is, which is www.therightside-of-normal.com. So I would love to hear from y'all if you want to learn more about this right brain learning phenomenon. It's amazing.